Hi there, I'm Kate Bowski and welcome to my blog Educate with Whole Brain. I have started to do some video tutorials on the Core 4 of Whole Brain Teaching, and my first video was about Class Yes. If you have not had a chance to view that one yet, scroll down a little bit on my blog and you'll find that in the previous post. And today we're going to talk about the second part of the Core 4, which is mirrors. And mirrors is an excellent tool for making sure that all of your students are engaged. So let me talk a little bit first about what mirrors are, and then we'll talk about why we do them and how it's going to help you in the classroom. So the first one is just plain mirrors, and here's what you do. You say to your class, mirrors, and you put your hands up. As you do this, you want your students to put their hands up too. Now, when you introduce this, a fun thing to do is kind of tell them, I'm testing my mirrors. And as you're making these gestures, your students are making them as well. And you can do some funny things with your hands and have your students repeat them with you, just to make sure that they're all together. So when you start this, you will say mirrors, and this is where you have a choice. Your students can say mirrors as well and put their hands up, or they can just put their hands up. Now, let me stop here and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience with mirrors. I use this quite frequently, every day, and the one thing that I found from last year is that when I had my students repeat the word mirrors and put their hands up, they also wanted to repeat everything else that I said. That's coming next. So my own personal experience, I'm going to make a little bit of a change in my classroom this year, and when I say mirrors, the only thing that my students are going to do is put their hands up, and we're going to see if maybe we can't get this to work a little bit better. So that's just my personal experience. You kind of have to test it with your kids and see what they can handle. So let's go back. You're going to say mirrors, put your hands up, and whatever gesture you want to make about the topic that you're doing, test out your mirrors a little bit first with your kids, and then as you say your content, your kids are making the gestures with you. So for example, one of the gestures that we use in the conferences is that of a fraction, and we say mirrors, and your students put their hands up, and you would say a fraction has a numerator and a denominator. So as you're doing this, your students are doing it as well. You might say something like a noun is a person, a place, or a thing. And then as you make those gestures, your students would do it as well. Now, the first thing you want to make sure that you do is you practice this with your kids, because they're not going to be used to doing gestures with their teachers if they're coming from a traditional classroom. So, in the beginning, first day, practice, your gestures, make some funny movements. It's almost like playing Simon Says, and have your kids follow you, and they'll get a great kick out of it, and it brings a little bit of levity to your classroom, which is great. The second thing that you want to practice with mirrors is making it snappy. You don't want your kids, as you do mirrors, to just kind of go, oh, mirrors, with half-hearted energy. We want them to be quick and snappy and with lots of energy, following with big gestures everything that you're doing. So this is going to be new for your students, so it is going to take a little bit of time to practice it, especially as you get into your content, because your gestures are always going to be changing. But what this does is it brings in the visual cortex as well as the motor cortex. They're seeing it, they're doing it with you, and that's going to increase the amount of learning that happens. Now, that's just the first type of mirror. There are actually 4 different types, but before we go into the other 3, can you imagine being a teacher standing in the front of your classroom and you say mirrors, and as you're making your gestures and your students are making them with you, you can see across your classroom that 100% of your students are with you. If they're not, you can use some of the other WBT techniques to help you get those kids back on track with you. Or you might have to say mirrors again and make sure that everyone has heard you so that they're on track. It's a great visual for teachers to be able to look out and see, I have 100% engagement from 100% of my students. And that is such an awesome thing about whole brain teaching. Now, let me talk to you about the other 3 types of mirrors. Once your kids have mastered mirrors with just the gestures, now you're ready to go to mirror and words. And this is where you're going to say a small piece of information, and your kids are going to repeat it with you. So for example, I would say mirrors and words, and my students will repeat mirrors and words. They'll do exactly what I do on this one. Now, I might say something like a noun, and they will say a noun, and then I would say is a person, and they would repeat the gesture while saying is a person. And then I would say a place, and my students would repeat a place, and then I would say or a thing, and my students would repeat after me with a gesture or a thing. So it's very, very small pieces of information where your students not only do the gestures this time, but they are repeating what you say. So now you've also got your Wernicke's and your Broca's area, which do your speaking and your hearing, and your children are engaging more of their brain as they're doing mirrors and words. So a great way to teach new content, do it in small little chunks and have them repeat your gestures and your words with you. Now the third one is called magic mirrors, and this is something that's new this year. It's very exciting, and magic mirrors is when you wiggle your fingers, you say magic mirrors, and your students will repeat magic mirrors. Now this is where it changes. You, the teacher, are no longer gesturing. You put your hands down by your side. Now you are doing the speaking, but your students are doing the gesturing while you talk. And so it's becoming a two-way conversation almost, where you're still speaking, but your students are gesturing. So it's a mixture of mirror and words. Now, the last mirror is called mirror ventriloquist, and this is something that is just great for those kids who need so much attention. They'd like to be the class clown, or they have to have all eyes on them. This is where you pull them up to the front of the class in front of you, and instead of you doing the gestures, you're just doing the speaking, but now this student is doing the gestures. My suggestion would be to make sure that you have all of the other kids on board with you, is that the other students that are in their seats follow this student's gestures while you're doing the talking. So that's a lot of information in a very short period of time. So let's go back over those 4 types of mirrors. The very first one that you want to teach your kids is just mirrors, and that is where they are just following your gestures. The second one is mirror and words. And might I say, before I forget on this one, I do talk to my kids since they are 3rd grade, they're little. Do not touch your mouth when you say mirrors and words. We don't need to have sick children out because they've been touching their mouth with their hands and they have germs. So mirror and words, but without touching their lips, is the second type of mirror. That's where the kids do the gestures and repeat what you say. It's kind of like Simon Says. The third type of mirror is magic mirror, and that's where the children are gesturing to go along with your words. And then the fourth type of mirror is mirror ventriloquist, where you're doing the talking, but the child in front of you is doing the gesturing, and the rest of the class will follow that child's gestures. So don't forget, practice your mirrors. You want them to be snappy and quick because we don't want to waste any time on slow or lethargic repetitions or answers. So get your kids in the habit of doing this very quickly, just like we did with the class yes. As you're practicing this with your kids, you might be wondering, gosh, there's 4 different types of mirrors. How am I going to teach all of this to my kids at once? And the answer to that is you don't. Remember, it's a very long school year, and it's always helpful to be able to have new, fresh ideas to pull out of your big back pocket. So my suggestion is that what I found works in my own classroom is just do mirrors and mirror and words within the first few weeks, maybe even the first month, month and a half of school, and get your kids down really well with those 2 types of mirrors. That can sustain them for quite a while because the gestures that you're doing with the mirrors are constantly changing based on the topic or the content. So don't be afraid that it's going to get old or boring or stale with your kids. And then gradually you can start to bring in the new mirrors. Bring in the magic mirrors next, because that's going to help set your kids up for some of the reading type games that you might find with whole brain teaching. And then bring, once you start to figure out your kids and who is it exactly that is the class clown, or who is it that likes to have all of the attention centered on him or her, although that might not take too long, then you can bring in the mirror ventriloquist and use that to satisfy some of those needs for that child. So don't be afraid about taking it slow, practicing, because that's very important. And what you're going to find is that you're going to have 100% engagement from 100% of your kids. And really, who can say that any teacher would not want that? So if you need more information about mirrors, there's several different places that you can go to. Of course, the wholebrainteaching.com website has a wealth of information on just about any whole brain teaching concept. You can take a look at the levels tab, and that will explain to you about mirrors a little bit more. You can go to the forum, which people post questions and answers on daily. I'm constantly looking on the forum for new ideas and questions and answers to things that I have questions about. And then, of course, you can also take a look at the videos that are linked to the WBT site. In addition to that, you can take a look at YouTube videos if you'd like to see more of mirrors in action. You can also take a look at all the blogs out there. Our bloggers have just taken off, and you will find blogs for every single grade level from K through 12. So I encourage you to take a look at that site. Let us know if you have questions about mirrors. You are always welcome to email me at katebowski@wholebrainteaching.com with your questions or your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. And we look forward to hearing about your news using mirrors in your classroom. So good luck with this, and power to the teachers.